We're gonna go into the best training split built out specifically for masters weightlifting, and we're gonna start right now. Now, when I'm looking at building out masters training, okay, that training split. Now, not everyone can be like masters CrossFit Games competitor Kim Stanball or absolute beast Holly Kaufman, who trains here on site. She's one of the strongest 49K masters lifters in the entire, potentially, world. Now, if we're looking at them, they're typically gonna be on a 4 to 5 day split, usually a 4-day split. But when we look at masters weightlifting, we have to recognize that, one, they've trained for a while in their past, okay? They have a large training background, typically, usually. 2, they're trying to make a living. 3, they have a family. In most cases, they have a family. So they're working 40 plus hours a week. They have a family. They're trying to pay their bills. They have a lot of stress. And that's going to lead towards what they've done in their past career and also how we're going to build out that training split. Along those lines, we also have to recognize where they're at in the masters world, okay? Are they 35? If they're 35, they're probably still gonna have some good mobility. We've had former American record holder in this snatch from the masters division, Earl Kunkel, who snatched 125 or 126 kilos in the 94K class before Jason Bonnick broke that. Those are 2 examples of absolute savages who were 35 to 40 years old, and they still had substantial amount of mobility. What you'll tend to see is that as somebody gets to 50, 55, 60, we start to lose mobility, okay? So we have to be aware of those factors and recognize that that does have an implication in their overall training. We have to plan that mobility into their training. So that's gonna take us directly into that first day of training. Now, if we start off with simple snatch technique work. I often like to use snatch technique work if somebody comes to us and they want to train specifically with a custom program for masters weightlifting. That day 1 might be snatch technique work, and we're just focusing on positions. We're trying to get them to move as well as possible. We're trying to get them to feel these positions. And if we use snatch technique to get ready for that training session, oftentimes that's a great mobility session. Then we'll take that snatch technique work and we'll go into some type of strength work, okay? So this is day 1, so that 2A would be some type of strength work. Now we're getting into a back squat or maybe a front squat, maybe even a clean pull, something like that, depending upon what their weaknesses are. But we can get into some type of strength work, and if they feel good, we might push that a little bit harder. And if they don't feel good, we just try and get that work done, and then we back off into our accessories. Now, when we're looking at accessory work, typically I like to do a lot of research around someone named Luc Van Loon, okay? So he's a Dutch researcher that's done a lot of work with hypertrophy for older people and protein consumption with older people. And based off of his research, we like to keep that hypertrophy work a little bit higher. So to recap that, day 1, we're looking at snatch technique, then we're getting into some strength work, and if we feel good on that strength, we're gonna push that pretty hard. Then 3A, 3B, that'll be hypertrophy work, typically in the problem areas like the elbows, like the lats, like the shoulders, potentially the lower back, and then we'll finish off with some more mobility work. That's gonna take us into day 2. Now, day 2, we're gonna start to transition to focusing on clean and jerks, okay? So clean and jerk work on day 2. This is where if we feel good, let's say we do Monday is day 1, Wednesday is day 2, okay? And if we feel good, we've done our mobility work, a lot of time masters lifters will benefit from getting into the sauna on their off day or even doing some light aerobic work. That's gonna help flush out that system and help improve their recovery from day 1 to day 2. So if they've done a good job with that and they've followed the protein guidelines that Luc Van Loon has researched for us, now we can look at this and say, okay, 1A, we're gonna focus on clean and jerks. If we feel good, we can ramp up to, let's say, a heavy double or a strong triple. Or if we're getting closer to a peak point, we might even push that a little bit harder. This is something that we do inside of our strength training app, Peak Strength. As a masters weightlifter, when you go in and you select that you want to train specifically for weightlifting, you can start off and just select that you only want to train 3 days a week. Peak Strength will provide a periodized program based off of how many days a week you want to train and your age. Okay, so if we hit that clean and jerk, when we feel good, we can keep pushing. If we don't feel good, make sure that you're telling Peak Strength you don't feel that good, and it'll lower that weight. Now, that second exercise, let's say that we did a squat on day 1. On day 2 now, on 2A, the strength portion of our lift, we're gonna do something like a floating pull or a snatch RDL or a clean grip RDL or a floating snatch pull to a high pump, something unique. We wanna target the hamstrings, we wanna target the lower back, and we wanna make sure that we're able to squeeze those glutes and get in and make good hip contact when we're doing this strength work. Okay, now 3A or 3B, after we do that floating pull or that RDL, 3A might be tricep work. We want to make sure our elbows are nice and stable. We want to fix that press out position potentially. And then we can pair that with some type of sled work. So we can do sled pushes, sled pulls backwards, sled walks forward, anything that has less eccentric work. But if we're doing sled pulls backwards, we're gonna light up the quads, and that's gonna help with our knees quite a bit. So we can focus on sled pulls in that 3B while we're targeting the triceps to keep strengthening up the elbow joint. And then of course, with every athlete, we have to finish with that mobility work. And again, inside of our strength training at Peak Strength, we have a mobility portion at the end of every single session that's gonna work you through that guided system. Now, this is gonna take us into that day 3. This is where things start to get really unique. On day 3, I typically like to work with some type of power snatch as that first exercise. Let's say it's a power snatch or a high hang snatch or a 2-box snatch, anything like that. And usually the way I'll set that up is that, okay, let's do a 2-box snatch, and we do this right now with Kim Stanball. Let's do a 2-box snatch, see how she's feeling, try to feel explosive, try to feel fast. So think about a power snatch from the floor, same concept. And then if the athlete, if the master's athlete feels good, they can start to go into the hole. They can start to see how that snatch feels. It's auto-regulation based off that priming exercise of that power snatch or of that 2-box snatch. A speed snatch exercise can then be followed, if the auto-regulation is set up and the athlete feels good, it can then be followed by a full snatch. That gets done, okay? Then we get into 2A, okay? So we're on day 3, 2A. This is where we're gonna do a back squat. Now, one of my favorite things to do is a pause back squat as the weightlifter is warming up. 1, this helps with mobility. 2, this is gonna help with just feeling that bottom position. 3, a lot of masters lifters, when they start to do back squats, their knees, their back might be a little stiff, but if they're doing those pauses, it warms up a little bit quicker and they feel stronger. They have better trunk control. So if you're feeling good, you can get rid of the pause. If you don't feel great, keep the pause in there. It can help improve your overall strength. Now 3A and 3B, this is where we're gonna be focusing on more hypertrophy. This is where we can look at a reverse hyper, some ab work, maybe some high rep rowing, meaning a 1-arm row, a Duffin row, bent over row, or a chest supported row. But we can pair that with, hanging leg raises. That's another great ab exercise specifically for masters lifters because it unloads the back. And then of course, we're gonna finish off 4A with mobility, 10 to 20 minutes of mobility. Now we have to make sure that we're consuming enough protein to help us with recovery. We need to make sure we're sleeping enough. We need to make sure that we are going to the sauna. We are doing some easy aerobic capacity work. Those are all factors around this training split. But most importantly, start off with 3 days of training. If you hit those 3 days, you can build upon that very, very slowly. You can get to 4 days, maybe even 5, but just get started with that 3-day split, and then you can slowly build upon that as you work through that entire year and you head into that big Masters Nationals, where ultimately you're gonna hit a big time total. If you guys need help with your training, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength today for 5 free workouts, because remember, freaks, if you wanna become a champion, you've always gotta cultivate your power. Peace.